Okay, everyone, let's grab our seats. It's officially 8:30 p.m. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Just really quick, we have some great after-meeting events goes on. I think every Friday night they're up there at Telford. They hit that meeting and then they go bowling afterwards. So Nick's over there. See Nick, see Brian. If you're looking for some activities after that, we have some treatment center commitments all over, psych wards, detoxes and rehab. If you're willing to do that, come out with us and carry a message of hope and recovery. See us after the meeting. With that, I got the world's greatest chairperson, I think. Who we got today? Miss Kara. Let's give her a warm welcome. Let's go.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kara, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home, everybody. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. and speaker at 8:30 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and principles of 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves? Please introduce your names.
I'm Will. I'm just coming back. I went out back on the line. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you.
Welcome, Will.
I'm Robert. I'm visiting from Lutheran.
Welcome, Robert.
Hi, I'm Austin. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, welcome.
My name is Jared. I'm an alcoholic. First time here.
Welcome.
Hi, we're Jack and Michelle. We are not alcoholics, but we were recommended to come here from Al-Anon, and our son is an alcoholic and drug addict.
Awesome.
We're here to learn.
Perfect. Everyone welcome. I just love this. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? In the back?
I'm David, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Damon.
Burning Desire has started back up at Lake Towhee. That's Friday nights. It's a bonfire meeting. It's open. It's a good meeting. Good friends, fellowship. 8 o'clock.
Awesome. Thank you. Nick?
My name's Nick. I'm an alcoholic. This Tuesday in Quakertown, the Jaywalkers group is celebrating a 2-year anniversary at 6 o'clock. For information about that, come see me on a flyer, address, location, live cake.
Ooh, cake.
Colin, alcoholic.
Hey, Colin.
There's an AA event tomorrow in Springhouse for Cinco de Mayo. It's called Tacos and Talent. There's stand-up, comedians, music, tacos. So if anyone wants to go or to send these sponsees, just send the name and I'll help you out.
Okay. Tacos. Taco sounds good. Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. just up the street at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street, Doylestown. Coffee is on at 6:15. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purpose of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. All CDs are available free of no charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page to keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. Now I would like to introduce Thomas. He's going to come up and read Just for Today, Prayer of Recovery. Let's give Thomas a warm welcome. Woo-hoo!
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Tom.
This is the Just for Today prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look and dress as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anyone but myself. Next we have Mary Rose to read the AA preamble. Please help us welcome her.
Okay, where is it? Here it is, Mary Rose, alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober, help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Next, I'm introducing, Brian. Sorry about that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian. I'm an alcoholic. And these are the 12 steps of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the results of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And with that, I'm going to bring Kara back up here so she's going to introduce our speaker for tonight.
The 7th tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big book CDs, events, and workshops, etc. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence off cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, I'd like to introduce the speaker as a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Let's introduce Suzy. She came all the way from Spring Hill, Pennsylvania. Woohoo!
Hi, I'm Suzy. I'm an alcoholic. I actually came from Kennett Square, but it's all good. I don't know where Spring Hill is, but Kennett Square is still pretty far away, not that far. My job when I'm asked to speak for Alcoholics Anonymous is to tell you all what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. So I said a prayer in the bathroom that God would remove any fear and let me be of service. I know it's not about me. I haven't done a 1-hour speaker meeting in a while, and I didn't used to get nervous, but where I go to meetings now, they do mostly half-hour. So I'm just used to doing half-hour now, and it's a lot less about me, so that's probably a good thing. So what I was like, I was born, hopefully we can all relate to that, right? I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll tell you, the longer I stay sober, the better my childhood gets. You know, when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have told you that, you know, my mom was an alcoholic and my mom was an addict and all these things. And there's a lot of differences. between me as a hopeless alcoholic and a hard drinker. And I'll kind of get to that later. So, born in Wilmington, Delaware, from a very young age, the Big Book describes alcoholism and addiction as this spiritual malady, right? So what that looks like in my life, long before I picked up a drink in any form, in a room full of people, I felt completely alone. There was never enough love, there was never enough validation, there was never enough success, there was never enough of anything to keep me satisfied. It's like you'd tell me you love me and I'd say, prove it. You know, it's like there's never enough, you're never gonna prove it to me. So I was always, playing this game in my head, right? I was comparing my insides to your highlight reel, and I never measured up, okay? And I'm delusional about what your life looks like anyway. So I'm comparing me at my worst to you at your best. It's this sick game. Even as a child, among other children, it's like, I'm better at soccer than her, but, not as good, my family doesn't have as good clothes as hers, and it was just, I was never equal to, I was never a part of. I remember growing up, so my mom's from Mexico, and I remember telling her, don't speak Spanish to me in front of my friends, right? I grew up in a suburban area in Chester County, Pennsylvania. I grew up in a town where kids get BMWs for their 16th birthday. And again, what I was seeing in my family was very different than what I was seeing, what my perception of other people's lives were. And I was just full of fear, being irritable, restless, and discontent from a very young age. I always say I'm a perfectionist because if I'm not the best at something, I'm gonna quit. Like, what's the point in coming in second? And I went through life like that, and for me, it's like, thank God I found alcohol. And I know that might sound strange, but for me, I was unable, the Big Book mentions these bedevilments, right? Talks about them. I'm unable to control my emotional natures. I'm a prey to misery and depression. I'm full of selfish and self-centered thoughts about myself. My childhood, I can tell you, I was all I thought about. I don't know. I used to think it was bad, but now I'm like, it wasn't that bad. It was just always about me. It was always about me. It was about what you did for me, what you did to me, because I'm never going to forget it, and what you could do for me. And it was just never about showing up, being a friend among friends. Being a worker among workers. I'm the best or I'm the worst, and that's how my ego is, right? Even if I'm consumed with like thoughts of self-hatred, I'm still all I'm thinking about. And the difference between me and a normal drinker, right? So a normal drinker goes out to the bar, has a few drinks, feels a little fuzzy, like, okay, I've worked tomorrow, I'm not gonna finish this one, I'm gonna go home. For me, it's not what alcohol does to me, it's what alcohol does for me. Because me, I go out, I have a few drinks, and for the first time in my life, I don't care about what all of you think of me. And that is truly the sense of relief and comfort I've been looking for since I was a child. Since I was so embarrassed for my mom to speak Spanish in front of my friends. I just wanted to fit in. If you asked me what color you liked, or what color I liked, what color do you like? If you asked me what kind of music, I still can be this way in my career. Like, I can be a chameleon. You tell me you're a Republican, great, me too. You tell me you're a Democrat, okay, same. It's like whatever you want me to say so that I can get what I want, I'm gonna say it. And alcohol, for the first time in my life, provided me like the freedom to not care, to just say what I wanted to say, do what I wanted to do, feel how I wanted to feel. And once I experienced the relief that came from alcohol, I go to a bar, unlike a normal drinker, I go to a bar, I have a drink or two, and it's like, that job is lucky to have me. I will be running that firm by next week. I don't really care if I'm late to work. And then by the third or fourth drink, it's like, oh, driving? Not a problem. Give me the keys. We're going to Atlantic City right now. Or maybe Philadelphia, like one of the two. Alcohol was like what I was looking for. It was like, I can breathe. It did for me what things couldn't do. And I turned to anything outside myself. One is too many, 1,000 is never enough. It could be food, it could be, as I have gotten older in sobriety, it can be the gym, it can be work, it can be like whatever it is. If it's feeding my ego, if it's filling up that void within my soul, if it's a temporary fix to make me feel better then, to make me feel good, to fill me up, I want it, I want all of it, and it's gonna stop working. Unless it's something that's lasting, something that works better than alcohol. And I'll tell you, my sobriety date, November 15th, 2011, if this didn't work better than alcohol to solve those problems for me, you would have a different speaker. I think the last time I spoke here was like 9 years ago, and the message hasn't changed in 9 years. I have a home group in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. It's a women's group. It's called SOS Women's. The ladies in my group have 20, 30 years sober, and they love me. I'm young to them, which is phenomenal. They take me out to dinner. Love them. Fabulous, fabulous group. And I have the honor and privilege of being here today. Whenever I'm asked to do something for Alcoholics Anonymous, I say yes. I've heard speakers say that Alcoholics Anonymous and this fellowship and this program gave them their life back. And for me, it gave me a life. I started drinking when I was, I think, 12, 13 years old, with my mom. A lot of things were going on in my life. My conception of God was very skewed from a young age. My father passed away when I was 6 years old. He took 2 medications together, and he passed away as a result of that. I don't share that to say he was alcoholic. He never introduced himself as an alcoholic. I don't share that for sympathy or pity. I share that because at that point in my life, my conception of a loving God went out the window. The only time I ever went to church in my life was with that man, and he was gone. And my life changed dramatically. All of a sudden there's, cousins and aunts and family members just in and out of the house, and you're telling me that there's this loving and caring God when I get to this fellowship, and it's like, where was God when I was 8 years old? But now I'm getting sober, and this God is supposed to come down from the sky and rescue me. I wasn't an atheist, right? I didn't believe in the disproof of God. I wasn't really agnostic. I believed in God. I just didn't believe that God would keep me sober. So I went through life like that. I got older. I started drinking with my mom. From a very young age, my drinking was abnormal. The big book, again, describes it as the spiritual malady, but there's 2 other parts to the disease of alcoholism. So I have this spiritual malady, this feeling that something's missing. And it's not given to me by my parents or as a result of the way I grew up. I know people who had 2 loving parents who grew up in a perfect household and still experienced the same sense of void, of missing, right? And I eventually find alcohol, and I start to treat that with alcohol. And the second part of my disease comes in, which is this mental obsession. So great that no human power can overcome it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if my mother is crying. It doesn't matter who passes away, loving children, loving family, whatever. This mental obsession is so much greater than that. And this compulsion to act, really. And once I start drinking, my body experiences the third part of this disease, which is a physical allergy to alcohol in all its forms. And the big book talks about being able to control and enjoy his drinking, right, is the great obsession of every alcoholic. Early on, I had a sponsor who pointed out to me, she said, "Suzanne, have you ever thought about controlling and enjoying your drinking?" And I was probably 21 at the time. I don't know, I got sober when I was 23, and I was like, yeah, I've definitely thought about that. I thought other things were the problem. I thought, everything else, alcohol, I'll probably be able to maybe have a few beers someday. And my sponsor pointed out to me, she said, Suzanne, a normal drinker would never even think about controlling and enjoying their drinking. It's like literally not a thought process that crosses a normal drinker's mind. They don't have to obsess about that or worry about that or try and control it. It's just something that happens, and usually they don't find themselves in rehab like 13 times either, right? So the external consequences of my alcoholism, fortunately or unfortunately, and probably fortunately, because I think a lot of alcoholics drink for a longer period of time and suffer perhaps, but in my life, the external circumstances and consequences of alcohol showed up very early. I was arrested for the first time when I was 14 years old. I was forced to go to 3 AA meetings at the time. I still have the first big book that was given to me in 2001, 3rd edition big book. And I remember it was me and my best friend Carolyn. We got arrested for possession. If you've ever seen the movie 13, like that was us. We would disappear for like 5 to 10 days at a time. We ran away to Bridgewater, New Jersey. Not a nice town. It's not the worst, but it's definitely not a nice town. At 13, 14 years old. And her father was an alcoholic, and he would take us to AA meetings. And we would just sit there. We had no desire to stay sober. We just didn't want to hurt from the consequences of alcohol. Right? Actually, our desire was to be sober as little as possible. But I knew that these rooms were here. Her father, I knew that he was an alcoholic, and he was a great dad, and he showed up for her, and he picked us up every day, from school, and he took us to his house, and he took us places, and I drank the coffee, I ate the food, I got a paper signed, and I said thanks, and continued drinking. And eventually I ended up back in Alcoholics Anonymous time and time and time and time and time again. I ended up getting sent to an alternative program for high school where you fill out packets. I don't know if it was supposed to be a punishment, but it was a 3-hour day with a smoke break in the middle, and for me that works. That works with my schedule. I finished school and I relocated to Philadelphia. I thought that it would shorten my daily commute that I was making at the time, and I thought it would end up really, really, phenomenally. And needless to say, it didn't. I was in and out of hospitals, detoxes, Temple Episcopal Hospital, psych wards, jail cells briefly, fortunately. Tried every method I could to still be able to drink. I remember, I think it was like my 3rd or 4th time in treatment. And the big book, the first step, right? They say it's the only one you have to work perfectly. Fully conceding to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. Believing in my soul that I'm alcoholic. Understanding what alcoholism is. Knowing once I start drinking, I'm not going to be able to stop. And as my disease progresses, I'm going to have to be stopped. And it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be extremely dramatic. It's going to be a police officer. It's going to be a psych ward. It's going to be someone dying. It's going to be something extremely dramatic. And once I stop, I can't stay stopped. Knowing that I was alcoholic, having worked the first step, knowing about myself, knowing about alcoholism, filling out packets about triggers, about people, places, and things, which are a joke, because the people is me, the place is wherever you send me. I got sent to Levittown, Allentown, York, Lancaster. I got sent to a wilderness program once in upstate New York. I'm not a wilderness girl. If you told me you're going to take me camping as a surprise, I wouldn't go. So I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I couldn't drink like a normal person. But like I was just powerless not to do it. I couldn't make myself act right. With the best of intentions, leaving treatment, best of intentions, not gonna do this anymore. Third, fourth time in treatment, I thought alcohol was the problem, right? And I thought, if I wasn't drinking that brand of alcohol, if I wasn't waking up sick, if I wasn't, doing these dramatic things, that like it would be okay. And I took myself wherever I went. Like I said, send me anywhere. Chester County sent me places. Lehigh County. I didn't even remember living in Allentown. I lived in Allentown. I did for a brief period of time. And it was like a cycle. The big book talks about pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, trading every one of my morals for the next drink. So needless to say, it didn't get better, right? So the external circumstances, the probation, parole, whatever it was, and my legal consequences were not great. It's not enough for an alcoholic like me. There's not enough of a consequence that's going to keep me away from that next drink. There's not enough fear or humiliation of what just happened. I'm not going to remember it strong enough to not drink. One of my favorite parts of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the part where it says, we are unable to recall with sufficient force the memory of the pain, I'm butchering it, and humiliation of a month or even a week ago to keep us away from that next drink. We lack the kind of defense that prevents someone from touching a hot stove twice. And it's like, I touch the stove, I get burned, it's dramatic, I'm in trouble, I know it's gonna be serious consequences if I do this again, and I do it anyway. I can't remember the pain strong enough. There's no amount of love that's strong enough. There's no amount of anything. And I'm not a sociopath. I loved my family. I didn't love them enough not to drink. Alcohol was my best friend. And so fast forward to 2011, I end up in treatment. Not a surprise. My favorite treatment centers were Bowling Green, Valley Forge, Eagleville. I got banned from Mearmont. I threw a blood pressure machine because they wouldn't give me my blood pressure medication, my blood pressure anxiety medication. And it was a circuit, right? It was a circuit. And Florida was never presented to me as an option. California, if it was, again, you'd probably have a different speaker. I like warm climates. Chester County did not want to send me to Florida, California, anywhere nice. I got Bowling Green, if you've ever been, my favorite treatment center, Eagleville, Valley Forge, just the circuit. So this time I'm in Eagleville, and I have to stay there for 90 days. And I get a call while I'm in treatment that my mom had a heart attack. Okay, and I grew up drinking with my mom. Still to this day, we have a very toxic and interesting relationship. She lives in my basement now. So I get a phone call that my mom had a heart attack. And like I told you, when I grew up, I watched my mom drink and do other things every single day. I would go to treatment, I would say, my mom's an alcoholic, this, that, and the other. My mom had a heart attack, and it was dramatic. She got put on oxygen, their bypass machine, etc., but she stopped. She stopped drinking, she stopped smoking, she stopped. And, the big book classifies the difference between, me and a hard drinker. So, a hard drinker might get an alcohol habit. They might look like me. They might show up in the same jail cell as me. They might be in North Philadelphia with me. But the difference between me and a hard drinker is that if there are consequences, if a doctor tells me, you're going to die if you keep doing this, a hard drinker, that's going to be enough. They're going to stop. And I'm unable to do that. Like I said, the consequences aren't strong enough. So I get a phone call, she had a heart attack, I want to leave, I'm not allowed to leave, I have to stay there for 90 days. Okay, so she's in the hospital, I get sent to an Oxford house. This is part of when I lived in Allentown before that, apparently, I don't remember. I get sent to an Oxford house in Allentown. A week into my stay at that Oxford house, she had a second heart attack in the hospital. Her family's in Mexico, I don't have a large family. And I made a decision that day to leave my Oxford house. If you would have hooked me up to a lie detector test and said, Suzanne, are you going to stay sober? I would have said yes, and I would have passed that test. My intentions were to be a daughter and be by my mother's side. I honestly believe that she was dying. And that's the problem with my intentions. My intentions, my feelings, my beliefs, my thoughts do not matter at all if my actions are contrary. So I can't say that I believe in love and tolerance and then someone cuts me off at a stop sign and I'm flicking them off and I'm cursing them out. Like I can't say, that I'm a good daughter and then I'm stealing out of my mom's purse. My intentions were to be a daughter. My intentions were to be successful, independent, all of these things. And my actions just spoke so much louder. So I leave the recovery house, having worked none of the 12 steps, no God in my life, no sponsor. I think I had 4 or 5 months sober at the time because I had been, in different institutions at that point. And I go to the hospital, and the same day, within 24 hours, I'm drinking. And it's bad. Like every time that I had brief periods of not sobriety, but being dry, like every time I was removed from alcohol, one of my first sponsors, who's still sober to this day, she sponsored me when I was like 13, 14, 18, this phenomenal woman, she's like a saint. And she said, Suzanne, what's consistent when you're like relapsing? Like think about it, like go through what's actually happening in your life. And I thought about it, and again, sent me to Allentown, Levittown, like wherever. The one consistent factor in every time that I picked up a drink was that I was sober when I did it. So like the problem's not alcohol. The problem's not that I have an allergy to alcohol. The problem's not what happens when I drink. The problem is that sober, I continue to return to alcohol. The insanity, like doing the same thing and expecting different results. So within that day, I'm drinking. She gets sent home from the hospital eventually with around-the-clock Bayada nursing care. She's in a hospital bed in the living room, oxygen tanks, IV poles. And I'm showing up at her house. I'm taking what I need to take from her. I'm drinking. The alcohol's not working. And I wish that I could tell you that walking into my mother's house, seeing her in that state, and stealing from her and taking from her was like my bottom. And like that broke me. But truthfully, that was like a Tuesday. If you stood between me and alcohol, it didn't matter who you were. I had a drink. And it didn't matter if you were dying, like I had a drink. And that came first in my life. And one day I showed up at her house and the nurse that was on staff that day called the police on me. And thank God for that. And seriously, God used my character defects in spite of myself to force me to do the next right thing. Every time I would get sober, I would try and get stuff back. So in early sobriety, like for me, I needed a phone, I needed a job, I needed to go to college, I needed to finish tomorrow, I needed an apartment, and I needed all of it right away. And then once I got it, I'd be happy. I was so addicted to the thought, and I think any of us can fall into this in life, like being so addicted to the thought that that next thing is gonna make me happy. And the truth is, if I'm not happy and content and at peace with my circumstances as they are right now, I'm never going to be happy. I truly believe that my life is like 99.99999% my attitude, perception, and actions in regards to the events that happen, and like 0.01, like what happens that I'm not in control of. Because I've been through some of the most horrific situations in sobriety and had more peace and joy in my heart than some of the easiest times in my life. It's all relative to how close I am to God and how close I am to these steps. Doesn't matter if I win the Super Bowl, which I don't know, I've never done that. That would probably be like really great, right? But it doesn't matter like what's going on. Like if I'm not working this program, if I'm not helping another woman, if I'm not taking another woman through the steps, if I don't have a home group, if I'm not going to meetings, if I'm not doing this stuff, it's never going to be enough. And so in that situation, I was sent to this program called the Gatehouse for Women in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And at that program, you have to get a sponsor and do a 4th step to get on 2nd phase. 2nd phase means you're allowed to go look for a job. So if you're going to tell me that in order to go get a job, to get a cell phone, to get a car, to get an apartment, to get all these things, that I have to get a sponsor, I'm going to pick the first sponsor I see. My requirements are that she has a vehicle so that she can pick me up, maybe take me to a job interview or two, she definitely has to have a car. And that's pretty much it. Car, first woman I see, let's do it. Quickly as possible. Let's do this, whatever the 4th step is, I'm in. And she took me through the steps. She had what I wanted. She was sober, right? She was sober, she was a mother, she was a nurse, she was an employee, she was a home group member, she was putting her hand out to the next woman. Externally, I had very little in common with this woman. She was from Lancaster. She was afraid of driving on highways. God used her and my character defects to really save my life. So I started going through the steps. The first step, I did the first step, I don't know, by the time I was 15. I knew that I wasn't drinking normally. It wasn't ever normal for me. The second step, being open to the idea that maybe there's something greater than me, right? Maybe this can work. And really truly realizing for me, in the first step, there's a dash. So it's obvious to me that when I'm drinking, my life is unmanageable. But what about the unmanageability sober that continues to drive me back to alcohol? I'm powerless over alcohol, dash, my life is unmanageable. My life is unmanageable sober. Not when I'm drunk. It's obvious when I'm drunk that things are completely out of hand. But sober, 30 days sober, 60 days sober, 90 days sober, I don't get the job I want, I drink. 4 months sober, I have everything I want and I drink. It's that unmanageability, that, again, the bedevilment, a feeling of I'm unable to be useful to other people. I'm a prey to misery and depression, even with everything that I want. It's never enough. And being open to the idea that maybe there's something greater than me, maybe something could work. And in the third step, making a commitment to go through with the rest of the steps, to turn my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions over to the care of this God concept. And for me, when my sponsor told me to say the third step prayer, she made me get on my knees and say it. We were at a clubhouse. The meeting had ended. We were there's this, it's the 521 Club in Lancaster. There's a pool table. There's all this stuff there. It's a really nice clubhouse. We're at the back of the clubhouse. She tells me to get on my knees and say this prayer. I read these words to a God that I'm not sure if I believe in. And my faith grew in spite of me. And still to this day, I can't wait until I feel like something's a good idea to do it. I can't wait until this seems like a good idea. I can't think my way into it. I have to act my way into right thinking. I can't think my way into right action because I'm self-centered, I'm lazy, I do one sit-up and I want to see a six-pack now. I eat well for one day and I'm Why haven't I lost 5 pounds? You know, it's just instant. I want instant gratification. I want it now, or I quit. And I say these words, I do what I'm told, I act my way into right thinking. And my sobriety still is very much like that. Like a lot of the time, the things that are so simple are the things that it's not like I don't want to do them, now in my life, I don't set aside the time to do them. I don't prioritize them. And that's what'll take me back to alcohol. So, you know, I won't sit up here and like go into detail on every single step. I'll kind of touch on some of them. There's a bunch of AA literature, approved and not. And for me, like the 4-step inventory, I honestly thought that I was gonna like read off these things to my sponsor and that she was gonna cry with me about all that I'd been through, and it was gonna be like trauma therapy. And I'd never done therapy. I actually had never done therapy really in my life until recently, because my sponsor told me I had to do it to deal with my issues with my mother. So that's fun. So I imagined it was going to be like, you know, I'm just going to tell her my problems and maybe she'll like tell me how to fix them and we'll go over my traumas and cry, and that was not the case at all. You know, here's me and here's God and the rest of the world. I have all this stuff that's blocking me. I have all this stuff that's blocking me off from God. It's blocking me off from a spiritual experience that can keep me sober. And it's blocking me off from any type of meaningful relationship with another human being, male or female. Because if you're capable of even half of what I know I'm capable of, I want nothing to do with you. Unless you serve a purpose in my life, right? Unless you're making my life easier, unless you're feeding my ego, unless you're doing something for me, I really don't care. And so I have all of this stuff, this ego, these fears, right? This playing the victim. I've been playing the victim since I was 6 years old. This self-centeredness, these resentments. I'm consumed with thoughts of the past. I'm consumed with fears that I won't get what I think I need, or I'll lose something, or I won't get what I want. And it all boils down to, like, for me, I used to think that the steps and like this God concept and this spirituality was like, you know, me meditating and becoming closer to this power in my life. And, you know, the big book describes like this higher power as like, this has been within me since I'm a child. I remember when I was a very small child, you know, like just playing on the playground. Like, I'm not consumed with thoughts of fear, of resentment, of sorrow. Like, and I see it with my children, you know, like they just play, right? They're little kids. The process of going through the steps has not been about reaching for something that's foreign to me that I can't attain. It's about kind of like removing all the stuff along the way that's blocked me off. Removing all that stuff that I picked up along the way, growing up and going through life, that's prevented me from having a meaningful experience with a higher power, with God. And these resentments, this conduct, this way that I behave, where I need alcohol to fix myself. So I do this 4th and 5th step. I talk to her about these things. She's been through a lot of the same things. She doesn't react mostly. She's like unimpressed. She has to go to work the next day. It's taking a long time. She's just kind of like pointing out my part, you know. And then we read 6 and 7, and she tells me to go home and be quiet for an hour and like say the 7-step prayer. I did about 35 minutes. I'll be honest, you know, I'm still sober. First step's the only one you have to work perfectly, right? I was so early on in sobriety. I went through the steps very quickly. Like, I had a very hard time. I was living in a halfway house with, I don't know how many other women Chester County sent to that house, but there were a lot of us. And I took almost an hour. I didn't really understand. I understood, you know, it was clear to me what my defects were. You know, the pride, the greed, the anger, lust, gluttony, envy, sloth, these things that show up. And in normal people, they serve a purpose, but like I have them to an extreme. And becoming ready and like asking God to take these things from me. And what a joke that is if he just took them, right? Years and years in sobriety, and happy to report the defects are still here. They morph, they change, but I do believe that God uses these things. Like, God uses these things for a purpose sometimes, and I can't self-will them away. I can't work on my defects, right? When I work on my defects, I get worse. When I try and work on my patience or work on, gossip, again, it gets worse. I'll give you an example. I was working on gossip, right? I was living in Lancaster at the time. I had started recovery houses. I was doing all this stuff, and I was with someone in one of the houses, and I thought I had hung up the phone, and I actually left a voicemail on someone's phone, speaking badly about them. And it was terrible. They could just replay it. If they couldn't hear it all, they could replay it louder and louder and louder. And it was my roommate at the time. And again, for a long time in my sobriety, I had to go through extreme pain before spiritual growth became attractive. I do like to think that the longer I stay sober, the easier that growth comes. Now growth is something that's attractive to me, and maybe not something that I literally have to be beaten into the ground, to try to attain. So I go through the steps. My first attempt at making amends, and I went through the steps quickly. I don't think there's any right way to go through the steps. For a while, I was beating people over the head with a big book. I was sponsoring half of Lancaster. I was working the first step. I was working the 12th step. I was sponsoring 10 girls. I was speaking all over. And I was sick. I was still pretty sick. I thought if you didn't go through the steps the way I went through the steps out of the big book, you were going through them the wrong way. I think there's this Buddhist saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I know for me, I try to stay sober every other way. We don't have a monopoly on God, right? But this is the only thing that worked for me. So I go through the steps, my amends process. The first time I called my mother to try to make amends to her, we were allowed to go on 23-hour passes out of the halfway house when she had been there for 5 or 6 months, something like that. And I called my mom and I said, and it's still, I think she's dying at this point, so she's waiting for a lung transplant, and she was very ill. And I called her and I said, Mom, I want to come see you on my pass. And she said, I don't know where you think you're coming, but you're not coming to this house, and hung up the phone. The police had taken me out of her house. My uncle and my cousin on my father's side, they're principled people. My mom's side, they're a little bit wild. They had come up and made sure with the police that I wouldn't be welcome in the house anymore. And I was defeated. It's my sponsor pointed out to me, she said, Suzanne, when was the last time you called your mom and you asked her how she was doing and you listened to her? Never. I would call her and I would ask for something, or I would call her and I would tell her how great I was doing. I have 90 days sober now, Mom. I have 6 months sober now, Mom. I have a job. And there's nothing wrong with sharing joys, right? But I wasn't showing up as a daughter. I wasn't listening. I wasn't trying to be of service. I wasn't trying to do any of these things. And she told me, Suzanne, I want you to consistently text your mom and ask her how she's doing and listen. I want you to call her every day, even if she doesn't answer, and ask her how she's feeling and listen. I want you to ask her if she needs anything, and if she does, you do it. And eventually she was willing to hear a face-to-face amends from me. When I had 18 months sober, I became her power of attorney. She's had 2 bilateral lung transplants since then. I physically took care of her for about 5 years. She had a GJ feeding tube. I had to flush her feeding tube every 4 hours. I had to administer food through that tube. I had to give her medications through that tube. I had to try and keep a job while maintaining this 4-hour flushing and feeding schedule with my mom's feeding tube. And you know what? Not once during those years in my sobriety did I think to myself, I should take that instead of putting it in her tube. And God gave me this unique set of skills that it was no problem for me to do this. And I was able to show up for her. I was able to show up as a daughter. I was able to be of service. And I was at the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for a long time, Like I said, in the beginning, I was doing the first step, I was doing the 12th step, I got super sick. My mom started almost dying. She had her first lung transplant, her body rejected the organs. I wasn't doing a 10th step, I wasn't doing an 11th step. Like my meditation would be like maybe reading a spiritual quote on Facebook, like maybe sharing it. My 10th step would be like calling someone and gossiping, but like maybe I see my part, And God placed a woman in my life who was like a big book sponsor, who told me about myself, who had me start doing a written inventory every day, she took care of both of her parents as they passed away. And again, like God continues to put these people in my life exactly when I need them in the different seasons of life that have been through what I've been through and walk with me hand in hand to like get me through whatever life throws at me. So in sobriety, like my first job, I had no life skills. I had about a year sober. I was moving out of my recovery house and I was moving into a townhouse. And I was trying to be nice, and like there's this new girl who was homeless moving in. She had nothing. So I was like, I'm gonna give her like, some body wash, some things. And I gave her some things. And she was like, what's this? I was like, oh, that's your detergent, laundry, it's in the basement. She was like, this is fabric softener. I had been washing my clothes with fabric softener for like 11 and a half months because when I went to Walmart, the bottle was prettier and it smelled better, so I picked that one. And I was like itchy all the time, and I thought it was like post-acute withdrawal. I was just like so itchy, but it was the fabric softener probably for a year. I didn't know how to make a cup of coffee. I didn't know how to go to a job interview. My resume included situations involving baby formula and Red Bull and literally no work experience. So my first job was at Arby's at the Park City Mall. I worked at Arby's, I worked at Hollister, $7.25 an hour. One day I remember I wanted to quit. Something dramatic happened. I walked out. I called my sponsor. She said, Suzanne, you're gonna calm down. I smoked at the time. She was like, you're gonna smoke a cigarette, you're gonna calm down, you're gonna say a prayer that God lets you be of service to your employer, and you're gonna go back in there and you're gonna finish your shift. And I was like, but my manager was 18 years old selling drugs out of the back of the Arby's, and I'm like, I'm making $7.25 an hour, like this is insane. And she was like, Suzanne, if you wanna get another job, you're gonna start applying for other jobs. You're gonna give them 2 weeks notice, and you're not gonna give them 2 weeks notice till you have another job. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I took those suggestions and I acted my way into right thinking, and God continued to put bigger and better opportunities in my life. I met a woman in my sobriety who gave me a career, who paid for me to finish parts of my education that enabled me to get licenses that I now have, who took me under her wing, and she was crazy, but truly just like an angel in my life. And I don't think it's a coincidence, again, that that day at the Arby's, when I wanted to walk out, and my sponsor said, you say a prayer, you go back in there, you do what you're supposed to do, that I listened, and God continues to lay a path down for me. So what it's like now, I've been sober a long time now, not that long, right? I like to think I'm still young. I'm not anymore, but been through a lot of seasons in my sobriety. I was engaged to be married. I took my engagement pictures on a Sunday, and my fiance overdosed and died on Friday. We found him in a motel room. I stayed sober through that, and not once during that time period did the thought of a drink come to my mind. The women from Alcoholics Anonymous who say, they would say things like, we're your family now. And I remember my mother was in Penn in West Philadelphia for 5 years in a row on Christmas and Thanksgiving. She spent a lot of time in the ICU there. And I would hear oh, we're your family now. I remember going to a meeting on Christmas Day, sobbing. My mom was in the hospital and just sharing about how I have no family and this, that, and the other thing. And the women from Alcoholics Anonymous brought food to my house, brought a Christmas tree to my house one time. My sponsor at the time was really big on Christmas. I hated Christmas. I don't hate Christmas anymore. I just hated my feelings. She always used to tell me that. She's like, no one hates Christmas. You're just super sad right now. and you don't like feeling. And it turns out she was right. Now I have kids and I love Christmas. The women from Alcoholics Anonymous showed up for me, showed up through all these seasons of my life, and God put a man in my life who treats me better than I deserve to be treated. A person who takes care of our family. When my daughter cries at night, she cries for him. He's probably a better, I say probably because my ego won't let me say definitely, probably a better father than I am mother. A selfless person. For the first time in my life, I don't have to worry about going through someone's phone. I don't have to worry about what someone's doing, what I'm doing. And it's because, whenever I have these fears or these obsessions, it's because there's something that's still broken in me that I don't want to look at. And it's easier for me to see it in you and point it out in you than it is to look at the parts of myself that are still broken. And God has truly blessed me with the ability to be a mother. The things that I was praying so hard in my life for God to change, were definitely the things that God was using to change my heart. To make me into the person that I needed to be, to do what I needed to do. And I have no doubt that that continues to happen. We had a hard time having children, and joke's on me, because then we had 3 kids in 2 years and identical twins. So we have a 4-year-old and we have 2-year-old identical twin boys, and they are really busy. They're really busy. They're biting people. They have almost been expelled from daycare. And I said to my husband, I was like, we better have at least 3 kids so that maybe one of them won't end up in prison. If we have 3, maybe there's a chance that there's 1 good one in there. I think there might be, but there are a lot right now. So there's never been a time in my life where I have been, I'd say, further from Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd say in the past year, 2 years, I've really made a recommitment to make Alcoholics Anonymous a priority again. There's no excuse. And I remember I would hear women, I would hear women say, I had 10 years sober, I had 15 years sober, I had kids, I stopped going to meetings. And I would think to myself, that never happened to me. I'm sponsoring 10 women, I had 3 speaking commitments this month, never happened to me. And life shows up. And AA has to come first. It has to come before my children, because I know if I drink, I will lose those children. I am 100% certain of that. And I am so blessed to be in a situation where my children have not seen their mother drunk. And they know that every night their 2 parents are going to be home and kiss them goodnight. My life today is truly beyond my wildest dreams. I hate when people say that, but my wildest dreams were literally to have a little money, not be on any type of probation, and have an apartment. That was it. If I would have got what I wanted when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have sold myself so short. And life is crazy. I was in the hospital for 6 days last week. I had an infected toenail, and it went to my bloodstream. And I remember thinking to myself, and the doctor was trying to tell me that I needed to take these medications home. And I was like, you don't know me. That's definitely not a good idea. But I thought to myself, it would be like a toenail that kills me. And it seriously was a toenail. The infection spread to my bladder, to my chest, it was horrific. I was in Wilmington Hospital. And that's such a, just example of my life. It's not the big things that get me. It's not the, fiance dying, mother being in the ICU, it's because in those times I'm at the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's when everything's going perfect, when I have everything that I want, and I've heard hell described as getting everything that you want and then living with it. and that's alcoholism. Because my blessings will turn into burdens. The things that I prayed for that I wanted so bad, now they're standing in my way of doing what I want. You know, and today I'm able to be grateful. Today, I don't have to worry that the rock in my shoe, figuratively or literally a toenail, is going to ruin my life. I'm able to show up. I have a home group. I've actually taken my first, and this is embarrassing to admit, I was never like an intergroup rep or a GSR. I've always sponsored a lot of women. There has never been a time in my sobriety where I'm not sponsoring at least 3 women. I think that's the only thing I've done consistently right, is continue to reach out my hand every single time a new girl walks in the door, give her my number. And if she asks me to sponsor her, take her through the steps. That's the only thing I've done. Maybe other things I've done right too, but I've recently gotten a home group. I've recommitted to that home group. I took my first service position. It's not exciting to me, but you know, again, because it doesn't feed my ego, right? It's not like me doing things that I'm getting patted on the back for. It's like me showing up for the mechanics of Alcoholics Anonymous and making sure that it works. Just being a worker among workers, a friend among friends, you know, etc. So I'm very lucky today to be here. I'm very glad that I was asked to speak. Even though I was gonna say no, I paused for like a solid 5 minutes. I was like, hold on, and then I was like, yeah. So, thank you for having me speak. That's all I have to say.
Good evening, my name's Nick, I'm an alcoholic. Let's have another round of applause for Suzanne. Just a couple quick announcements and we'll wrap it up. The food and fellowships always starts at 8 o'clock, so if you want to be of service and come early, help us set up, we always need help with that. We do need help cleaning up. All the chairs will go on the rack over there. The chairs at the tables will stay where they are. Let's thank our kitchen staff, Annette. And Howard! Thank you so much. It's customary to form a line, so we usually line up here in the front and thank our speaker. They come here at their own time and expense. And if you're struggling or suffering, and if you don't tell us where it hurts or what's going on, how can we help you? So find somebody after the meeting if you're in that position, and please talk to somebody after the meeting. So if you care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. We'll close with the Lord's Prayer. Okay, a moment of silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily